and landscape planning and landscape architecture and urban planning with a specific focus on urban agriculture, linking to health issues. So that's my brief introduction.
Thank you, Giles, and thanks for presenting today. And our second presenter is Nancy Grimm. She will be presenting the Urban Resilience Sustainability Research Network. Do you want to introduce yourself briefly, Nancy? And she's also the co-director of the NATURA.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. And this is the kickoff of our webinar series where we get to hear about all the networks. Hopefully from now on, we'll have two. I'm sort of filling in because we didn't have two, but from now on, I think we're good on that. So please sign up for the webinars. We want to hear about all your networks, and thanks for joining us today. And so Sioen, do you want to turn it over to Giles to get started?
Yes, Giles, do you want to share? I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and now you can share your slides.
All right. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. So as mentioned, I'm science officer with Future Earth. And Future Earth is a relatively complex organization. We have many activities going on simultaneously. But I'll give you a focus on our activities related to the Urban Knowledge Action Network, and of course give that a little bit into the context of the broader activities, both related to the science policy interface, as well as the linkages with practitioners and so forth. But first of all, I really want to thank you, everybody at the NATURA project, to give me the opportunity to present to you the Urban Knowledge Action Network. And I want to especially thank the organizers for facilitating this. So Future Earth is a network of scientists, researchers, and innovators designed to promote the knowledge needed to support transformations towards sustainability. We're generally using a systems-based approach with a focus on complex Earth systems, but also human dynamics across different disciplines, especially to understand and underpin the evidence-based policies that are needed to lead us towards sustainable development. We're not a new organization. It's basically Future Earth was developed out of the collaboration of over 3 decades of global environmental change research. This started out of the International Geosphere Biosphere Program, led also the Diversitas and International Human Dimensions Program in Global Environmental Change. And several partners have been, continuously involved, or some of them have merged. And the Future Earth Secretariat has been established in 2013, and a permanent secretariat has been working as of 2015 with the aim of making this a 10-year program. So we are a distributed organization. We have 5 global hubs. There are various institutional reasons for this and linkages, but this leads up to a fairly complex network with 20 global research projects, which are core disciplinary focused projects that have been around even before the establishment of Future Earth. And then 9 knowledge action networks, of which the Urban Knowledge Action Network is one, which has a particular focus on making sure that the disciplinary science is also translated into actionable activities. Now, what you can see also from this map is that we have these global hubs, but they're not representing every region. So in total, we have over 1,000 researchers that are connected in this network. And these are supported by the Future Art Secretariat, which is distributed in these 5 global hubs, but also in regional offices and centers. And in some regions that are still not represented, we have strategic partners generally that are active as well. And then there are national networks. So we have over 20 national networks where either strategic partners activated a local network. And these are active in various grades. Some of them are very active, some of them are kind of there as a informal organization. But why urban? So of course we have, because of this urban focus, we have a focus on cities. But as I think everybody here on the call as well knows, that cities play an essential role for global sustainability. They occupy more than 2% of the world land areas, and they produce also the largest amount of waste, but at the same time also GDP. They're complex. They have various states of the economies, cultures, and biodiversity. Transportation needs to be considered in that. But they are also constantly changing. So just to give you a little bit of the reminder of the numbers here, by 2050, we're expecting to have an additional 2.5 billion people in the world's urban population. And 90% of this increase in population is going to occur in Asia and Africa. And I think this is a very essential element as well for the NATURA project to consider. And also the power of cities seems to be increasingly valued by various organizations. It's also cities that play a leading role in activating, for example, informal networks, even in the global pandemic that many of us are experiencing right now. But at the same time, although there's all these challenges around cities, but these are generally also the places where some of the solutions are emerging from, and this is something to treasure. So one of our Urban Knowledge Action Network co-chairs mentioned that sustainability will be won or lost in cities. So we consider cities being essential. And as mentioned, these major growth rates of city population and transformations can especially be seen in Asia and Africa, but they're also relevant, and they have different variations of transformations in other parts of the world. So the Urban Knowledge Action Network is supported by myself, a science officer, and Eliana Robson, who's based at Future Art Australia. So this is a national committee that has dedicated itself to the global activities of the Urban Knowledge Action Network. So this means that also through this work, we are collaborating in different scales, trying to link some of the more local activities with the global and vice versa. And it also expands and accelerates the work that we're doing. So we're especially focusing on cities, but we hope, and we have been active on generating knowledge based on the network that we have been developing, and also tools to accelerate transition. The mission is to contribute to sustainable urban futures with a focus on livable, equitable, and resilient transdisciplinary collaborations, which are solution oriented. So this speaks for itself that not everything has a nature-based solutions focus, but it is very, very much an essential element behind this network. So in terms of the governance of the Knowledge Action Network, we have a steering committee, we have an advisory group, and then we have the wider network members. In this case, Feynman McPherson and Shumei Bai are the elected co-chairs of the Knowledge Action Network. And these were selected through an open, transparent process where the steering committee and advisory group casted their votes on who could be the best people to lead this network forward. And the steering committee is also selected through such a process where we also look at the gender balance and the expertise and position in the field, as well as geographical representation. So because we are a global organization, we want to make sure that, in a sense, nobody is left behind. But of course, some regions are easier to reach than others. So depending on who's on the team, sometimes the activities vary a little bit. But I think some of you might recognize some of the faces or the names in this list, and we have several people that are working on nature-based solutions. So here as well, we have the advisory group, and the advisory group, the members, in a sense, are slightly different in terms of the amount of work that they can dedicate to the Knowledge Action Network, but they play key strategic roles, or they are based in sectors where they play a very good role in advising the wider steering committee. For example, just here central in the image we have Kateoke, which is who's a policymaker. I think many of you know here as well. But we also have, for example, on the steering committee, Seth Schultz, who was part of C40 cities. We have people from international organizations, such as UN Habitat, which plays an active role in translating the knowledge from within the network into policy, but also the members that come from non-academic organizations, they play an essential role in actually providing us with what are the key practical issues that need to be addressed. So the Knowledge Action Network focuses on 3 core elements, or it divides its work into these 3 points. Primarily, we're focusing on building communities, particularly of practice, and mobilizing the capacity for sustainable urban futures. This is done among innovators in research, policy, business, non-governmental organizations, and the general public. So the essential part here is that it's a transdisciplinary group. We're facilitating, co-designing, synthesizing, and amplifying research to support the implementation of global sustainability initiatives at the city level, of course, taking into consideration the surrounding areas as well. And then turning knowledge into action by building networks, democratizing data, and bringing underrepresented voices into policy and planning. Now, various parts of this, like each element of this is in a different stage of development, but all of these are basically aligning the work of the network. Sorry, I'm seeing that there are some chats. I don't know if there are questions popping up, but I somehow can't see them. I don't know if I should be answering. But yeah, please stop me if I need.
No, that's okay. Go right ahead, because we'll have time for questions when you're done.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll go through these 3 elements briefly to introduce some of the work behind this. So building a community of practice, this is not an easy task. A lot of the work involves communication skills and facilitation across cultures, but also disciplines within this urban focus. For this purpose, we have various ways of reaching out to the wider network. So what we consider our core members are those listed here on the open network. But we also have an active newsletter, which gives an update every month on the activities of the steering committee and its wider members that are contributing activities. But we also have a Twitter account, which has been fairly active as well. And just a couple of months ago, we actually had a network survey that we conducted. That was a fairly straightforward survey to basically request on what the broader members within our community were interested in. And I think quite relevant to the group here is that there was a lot of interest on biodiversity in cities, urban ecology, transformations, and resilience issues. So there is a lot of, as you know, there is a lot of work being done in this sphere. And I think any kind of network that's focusing on activities related to this, especially within the NATURA project as well, can benefit from connecting to avoid, on one hand, duplication, but also sharing the knowledge across the networks. As for facilitating and amplifying research, the steering committee has actually gotten together just at the end of last year. And we had another meeting planned in March to continue this work, but unfortunately we had to cancel due to the COVID-19 situation. But we have been developing a strategic goal and actions document with these 5 focus points. I won't be going into detail of these focus points, but just to give you a brief flavor of the activities is that, so we're looking at all kinds of topics that are accelerating transition to pathways, ensuring equity and inclusivity, amplifying innovation from the urban south, negotiating complexity and interdependencies, and navigating global environmental change. So these are very broad kind of titles of subcategories as categories under the strategic goals and actions. And within this, there are various levels of nature-based solutions and resiliency activities embedded. Some of the other highlights I want to make for this introduction is that of the work of Future Earth Australia, who's developed just recently a 10-year strategy on the cities and regions, the selected cities and regions within Australia. They were built on a broad collaborative process that also included researchers, industry, and government on various levels, as well as civil society. They've developed this as a national strategy with a focus on the Sustainable Development Goals. It's based on effective information and data sharing, scaling up of innovation, and sharing what works. So all these different cities have their own policies, have their own activities, and this is a kind of an essential first synthesizing document that aims to share the knowledge across these different cities. And I think this is a great example for what the NATURA project aims to do on a global scale as well. Another project I want to highlight, which was accepted within the Urban Knowledge Action Network, is that on the insurance value of ecosystems. So we're thinking about what could the insurance value of ecosystems mean How can cities partner with the private sector to reduce risk in the region through insurances? And what are some of the principles and guidelines behind that? So thinking more broadly, if you have a city, and increasingly there's so much information on the risks of urban areas, but that's also where capital is being centralized. There needs to be systems in place where, or there can be systems in place where these cities pay the landowners of the surrounding regions to maintain their ecosystems to, for example, reduce flood risks in these regions. So we've been developing a database on what kind of activities can be linked with this, and yeah, we're hoping to move that forward within the near future. Some of the previous work, so Timon McPherson, which I think he might be on the call here as well, has been thinking deeply about, together with several of the partners, including the other co-chair of the Urban Knowledge Action Network, Shimei Bai, have been thinking about how to design the desired futures of cities, thinking about the path dependencies, but also about how to add in strategic interventions to create the urban futures that are desired. And to amplify some of this research, this has also been, well, not necessarily particularly this research alone, but also various other scientific output documents have been cited in various media presses here as well, as you can see on the right, where Timon and colleagues are aiming for that, or basically suggesting for scientists to have a bigger say in the future of cities. And this has also, this kind of work has also resulted in a kind of network analysis, which was published at the end of last year, where in the context of research and practice, a complicated stakeholder web was analyzed with the attempt of identifying critical nodes or linkages between the network. I think if people are interested in further details of this, I think we can, or I think you can access the publication, but I think maybe we can discuss this over the chat or later on in the Q&A. So turning knowledge into action, the Urban Knowledge Action Network was one of the strategic partners for the city's IPCC conference, which was held in 2018. And this has also resulted in a policy document which focused on the pathways for climate adaptation and mitigation in cities. In the figure itself, the inner circle, the orange one, presents key cross-cutting issues and knowledge gaps for a step change of knowledge generation on cities and climate change. Well, the middle circle, multicolored, presents 6 topical research areas. The external green circle presents 3 suggested approaches, which may facilitate implementation of research and an action agenda. So, of course, this is not the work of the Urban Knowledge Action Network itself. I think maybe some of the people on the call here were part of the development of this as well. But it's one thing that I wanted to highlight here. There have been several publications coming out of the Urban Knowledge Action Network, but these are some of the books that we've contributed to as well. So the Urban Planet, which was edited by several of the Knowledge Action Network steering committee members and advisory group members, as well as the Nature in the Urban Century book that came out in 2018. But also, just as a seeing we're almost running out of time, we within Future Earth's community, or the Secretariat, supports a lot of the activities that have been developed within the various networks, including within the Urban Knowledge Action Network. And this is a rather essential or a major publication that came out just at the beginning of this year on our future on Earth. It basically discusses the critical stage of transition that people have to make for planet and society. And there was a box describing the urban transitions much needed. It also touches upon the integration of different sector stakeholders, but also touches upon green infrastructure and the Green New Deal, those kind of activities. Then I thought I would just highlight a couple of the publications of some of the members within our network. But yeah, we can come back to this later if interested. And then just really quickly, as a last activity, we're organizing a Earth Day webinar, which is linking the environmental and health issues of COVID-19. It's going to be held on Wednesday, April 22nd. And Timon McPherson is going to be one of the presenters focusing on the work he's been doing in New York City on COVID-19. So thank you very much, everybody, for listening. And this was a brief introduction of the various activities of the Urban Knowledge Action Network.
Thank you, Jill. I think we can use time for few questions if there are any urgent ones.
People can speak up.
Yes.
They have questions.
If somebody wants to add something, I'm seeing a couple of familiar names in the network here. That might be welcome as well.
I have a question. This is Ann Richmond. I'm with the ASU Sustainable Cities Network. So I'm curious with regard, first of all, thank you for the wonderful presentation. It's a fascinating network, and I'm eager to learn more about how you've interfaced with some of your private sector and policymaker folks throughout the world. But I'm curious as far as, is there any evaluation component to it as to the recommendations that are made for action, how those actions are followed through, and also to what extent they are successful?
Yeah, thank you for your question. This is it's a challenging question, but I acknowledge it's a very important one. And the answer is that this very much depends on the particular activity. So there have been several projects that have been set up, but at the same time, several of the members within the steering committee, the advisory group, and so forth, they hold key positions within cities. For example, let me just go back here. We have Deborah Roberts, who is a practitioner. So she can directly advise people within the steering committee about this is really what we need on a city level. And can also directly give that feedback on like, okay, this is what you did, and this is the kind of implications it's been having in the field. So it's more of a integrated development. And that's very much what we mean behind the transdisciplinary element of this, is that it's not like a simply evaluation at the end of the project, but it's this constant back and forth feedback between the different sectors. So that's the general idea behind it, but to give a fair answer, it depends on the project as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for your question.
I have another question if you're open to a second one.
Absolutely.
So in general, urban areas, large regional areas are made up usually of one centralized large community, but then they're also surrounded by smaller communities. How do you see, or are you measuring the impact of a large urban center, meaning the main city, and how their actions influence the actions of communities on the perimeter? Are you monitoring how those centralized, I guess, policies spread out and permeate beyond just that urban core?
Excellent question. I think I would want to, just to be sure, because I'm not particularly confident that I can answer this correctly, representing the diverse activities that are ongoing. But I would suggest looking at the Sustainable Cities and Regions report by Future Earth Australia. And I'm happy to actually connect you as well with the people that have been working on this to figure out how they've been approaching this directly. But I do know that it has frequently been a discussion on how to integrate the various views even beyond the city borders, including second-tier cities that are directly connected with that.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, Jill, this is Sioen. I have a question. Is there any specific thing that you expect by being in the NATURA network of networks that Future Earth UrbanCon wants to gain out of this knowledge network or the network of networks?
Yeah, I think for several of the members, it was rather interesting to take part in NATURA because there are so many activities going on all over the world. And I think many people are often simply looking even for case studies. So like even having a platform where these kind of case studies are shared is so essential. Data is such a big issue. So all those things where we can all learn from each other, that's been particularly the reason why the Future Earth Urban Knowledge Action Network has been keen on taking part in the NATURA project.
Thank you. So now we are going to turn it into Nancy Grimm. Nancy will present about the Urban Resilience to Extreme Sustainability Research Network. And Nancy, take it away.
All righty. Okay. What are you seeing on your screen?
Presenter view.
Okay. And now?
Looks good. It's a full.
All righty. Great, thank you. I'm going to present on this network. This is the network that was the instigator of this NATURA project. So we have been funded for the past 5 years, and we're coming to the end of our funding this summer, but we have some funds to keep going a little bit, and we're hoping that NATURA will help us to do that. So who we are, we have been a group, oops, sorry. So we have been a group that's been growing since 2014. We're now numbering more than 180 researchers and more than 230 practitioners. We focus on 11 cities that are listed there. We have a strong emphasis on early career scholars and training. So we have had 18 postdoctoral fellows, 41 graduate fellows, and 47 graduate associates. Our executive team is pictured there at one of our all hands meetings. Starting on the left is Tisha Munoz-Erickson, Timon McPherson, whose name is going to come up all over this network, I think. David Iwaniak, Peter Groffman, Erin Friedman. Now she's the graduate student representative, now replaced by Stephen Elser. Michael Chester, Charles Redmond is the PI and co-director, and Angela Grobstein and Thad Miller. We are ecologists, social scientists, physical scientists, and engineers, planners, and practitioners. And one of the main themes of this is the transdisciplinary integration across social, ecological, and technological domains in a system perspective. You can see here our website address as well as our Twitter address. So just some information about the network. This is some analysis done by Tisha Munoz-Erickson, and what you can see between 2016 and 2019 is a really big increase in the number of participants as well as connections. What's interesting is we see a decrease in density, which is indicative of a more distributed network by 2019. And the darkness of the color reflects the number of connections of any individual, and each dot represents an individual here. And if we look at any sort of given individuals, this is an example network member who is an engineer. On the left in 2016, this engineer had connections with one designer, one social scientist, and a fair number of natural scientists. The white indicates that we don't know what discipline those people came from. But over 3 years, this one person has developed many more connections with social scientists in green, for example, designers and architects in yellow, and natural scientists in blue, as well as additional engineering colleagues. So this is about the network and who we are. The question could be asked, why are we a network? What are we trying to accomplish? Well, the rationale for this network is that, firstly, natural disasters are on the rise. As you can see in this plot from 1980 to 2017, the increase in natural disasters, especially those related to climate change. And cities are particularly vulnerable to extreme events, given their locations. Many cities are along coasts and drylands, etc., and the concentration of people and infrastructure in those areas. At the same time, the world is urbanizing. Most of the population growth that we know we expect in the next decades will be in cities, and most of that will be in the less developed world, or the so-called global south. So we really have a huge challenge that faces all of us, which is that urbanization and climate change are on this collision course. And we think of infrastructure as the battlefield where this takes place. So infrastructure represents the physical components of interrelated systems that provide commodities and services essential to enable, sustain, or enhance societal living conditions. And as I said, we have social scientists, ecologists, engineers. So although we do have some focus on green infrastructure, it's not a restricted or the only focus that we have. We also are focused on resilience, and I'm just putting this up here to sort of say how we are loosely defining resilience of cities and their infrastructure. They're resilient when they can persist, adapt, and transform in the face of stress and shocks while maintaining their function and identity. And we think of resilient systems as being flexible, adaptive, multifunctional, participatory, inclusive, publicly supported, and equitable. So in our project, we identified several strategic goals. The prioritization ranking that you see in red on the left is based on surveys of participants in the network. So of these strategic goals, the benefits of a SETS approach to understanding and intervention is tops. The value of co-production of knowledge and action with practitioners at all stages of the process. Integrating a concern for social equity in the design, evaluation, and implementation of projects. The use of green and hybrid infrastructure. So here's where nature-based solutions come into the picture. the idea of safe to fail concepts and resilience strategies, an interaction across the network to improve learning, innovation, and action plans. And I showed you some information about how well we've done as far as interaction is concerned. And then finally, this network includes 3 or 4, four cities that are Latin American cities. And so we're interested in how cultural differences in perspectives on resilience, prioritization, and action will play out. We have 4 big, broad areas, I guess you could say, in which we're working. One of the most important foci is the city-based scenario workshops and translation and implementation activities, which I'll talk about in a little more detail. We also have numerous task forces that are taking on fundamental issues and integration across these social, ecological, and technological domains. These task forces usually involve people from multiple cities, multiple disciplines, and so forth. Some examples of task forces that are currently still active include the Urban Flooding Task Force, sets vulnerability. So what is vulnerability in a social, ecological, and technological sense, and green infrastructure, and there are many more. Within each city, there's a researcher practitioner team that is conducting research and working with practitioners. Finally, we have a major emphasis, particularly in the latter years of the project, on comparative urban research. So really thinking about how we can understand the different needs of different cities by looking and comparing, sharing information. And so this is one that we see growing into NATURA in a big way. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our scenarios work because this has been a major focus of the project, as I said. We take an approach of looking at scenarios as plausible representations of the future of a place or situation, and recognizing that there are many possible futures. So these scenarios make explicit the assumptions of different actors that participate in the scenario process. They help the participants articulate their values, visions, and ideas, explore the impact of alternative policy choices, anticipate and deal with uncertainty and shocks, and bring people together around a common vision of the future. So we're really using this transdisciplinary approach that involves participatory visioning and so forth. And this is sort of a timeline, if you will, of the kinds of activities that go into and result from the creation of these scenarios. We conduct surveys of multiple actors within each city. We do vulnerability analyses. We conduct an analysis of governance documents. That is, what have cities said they want to see happen and be implemented in our cities. This is precursor to the scenarios workshop. Then we take a large amount of data and analyze the data through various techniques, including both qualitative analysis and quantitative analysis that results in this sort of agent-based modeling that produces these maps of different futures. In some cases, we have held second workshops that are identifying ways that we want to move forward. So these are really one-day workshops. They have a lot going into them and then a lot coming out, but it's an intensive one day. This is an example for South Phoenix, showing just some pictures of some of the activities and the 5 themes that we used in the South Phoenix. These are names of the future scenario that we used in the South Phoenix workshop. In each workshop, we start by outlining what the future challenge is, usually having to do with population growth and aspects of extreme weather. So here for Phoenix, you can see the number of days that in the future, the temperature will exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 40 degrees C. then we identify with the participants a set of goals for each scenario, identify strategies that can be used to meet the ideas, those goals in the scenarios. A lot of work on details. So where should this happen? When should this happen over time? And then end the workshop with tangible narratives about a life in the future of a person living in that scenario. So just some examples of some of the products that we have come out with in our scenario workshops. These are models of future land cover that have come out of the Urban Systems Lab led by Timon McPherson. This is a business as usual scenario here, that if development continues and population growth continues in the way that it has. This is the 5 different scenarios that were identified by the City of Hermosillo workshop. So you can see the main point here is really big differences in future land cover depending on what scenario is worked on, is adopted by the group. And one of the things I want to point out here is that we're looking at, in comparison to the business as usual scenario, we're looking at positive futures. So people are really putting their normative values into these futures and identifying things they would like to see happen in their city. So these represent 5 of a potential universe of future configurations for the City of Hermosillo. When we have these land cover maps, we can do a lot with them. And here's an example from the City of Phoenix. This is looking into the future for the region of Phoenix in 2060. These are 2 different scenarios. One is called the true cost of water, which is focused on banking water for the future. And the other is called the Emerald City, which is really focused on using water, capturing rainwater and stormwater and using that to create a much greener environment. And you can see based on this WRF modeling, the weather research and forecasting model, really big differences in the heat outcomes between the true cost of water scenario and the transformative city scenario. And what this illustrates is the kinds of trade-offs that people have to make in really thinking about the kinds of strategies that they would like to implement in their city. We also, as I said, have this analysis, qualitative analysis of the scenarios. And here we're focusing on how well these scenarios meet criteria for resilience, equity, and sustainability. This is a qualitative analysis called Rescue that Magda Bebes has developed. And you can see we're using city sustainable development goals, the general sustainable development goals, and some criteria for resilience to evaluate those scenarios. Just some examples, these are classic flower diagrams showing the resilience profiles for the 5 different scenarios that were done in South Phoenix. And you can see there really are quite a lot of differences in how they do in these resilience criteria. We can also compare resilience among cities, or in this example, we're showing how the scenarios at the regional scale compare with the scenarios at the local scale for South Mountain Village in Phoenix. Just pointing to here the big difference in participation with the local, the local scoring much higher than the regional, and differences in adaptive management, which isn't high for either case, but is higher for the regional than the local. Other things that come out of these scenarios and also the work that's done in the cities include new ways of visualizing the work that's being done. So for example, this is a part of a screenshot of a story map that was created by Robert Hobbins for the city of San Juan, showing 6 feet of sea level rise and the impact on the San Juan International Airport. This is a really cool story map that you can get access to. It's really, really neat to look through it. We also have developed renderings of these future scenarios. This is an example for the city of Valdivia, Chile. and the innovative city, which you can see on the right, adaptation of how it would change between now and 2080. And here is one for the city of Hermosillo that was created by Implan, which is their planning organization in Hermosillo. We also can create visualizations of vulnerability. This is a screenshot, again, taken off the visualization platform that's been developed by our colleagues at the New School. This is vulnerability to heat for South Phoenix. This is South Phoenix here. And you can see the variation in heat vulnerability that was developed and mapped onto this visualization platform. For each of our scenarios, we also produce a final report. These are available on our website. And they go through what the different scenarios are and include some of the data outputs that we've talked about. And then just backing up to the whole project, of course, we have a Twitter account, which you can see on the left here. We have a newsletter, which just comes out twice a year. It's produced in English and in Spanish. And we also have a blog. We have a podcast that was developed completely by graduate students called the Future Cities Podcast. It has numerous episodes at this point and many, many views. And then again, these really fantastic visualization products that have been developed through Timon's Urban Systems Lab at the New School. So just to summarize, our vision in this network is a network of collaborating interdisciplinary scientists and practitioners from diverse world cities working together to promote, design, and implement urban infrastructure that is resilient in the face of future extreme events, provides ecosystem services, improves social well-being, and exploits new that in relations and relates those initial objectives that I was describing earlier. So that is it. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Nancy?
Yes.
Thomas here.
Hi, Thomas. How are you?
Hi. I'm fine. Good to see you are fine too. I just have a question, Nancy, and that is on sort of the long-term impact. Have you included sort of resources to measure impact like 5 years from now, or?
I lost you for a moment there. I lost you for a moment. Can you repeat that?
Have you included resources so you could try to measure impact like 5 years from now on all the sort of activities you've been doing in the different cities?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have been evaluating the activities that we've done in the network as we've gone along. Some of the data I showed you were the success of the network in terms of connectivity and density and so forth. But we also have in each survey each year, we have asked this question of both our researchers and our practitioners. We will likely try to continue that one more year, but we don't have the funding to continue it beyond the next year. So it's a great idea, and it actually would be something to try to get funding for. We do have one more year of educational evaluation as well, because we have a very big education program, as I pointed out. And so we've had some pretty substantial evaluations of the impact of that on postdoctoral and graduate fellows in the program. And that will continue for one more year as well.
No, it just would be really interesting to know and lessons learned like 5 years from now on what has actually happened and what has been implemented successfully and what has not, for example.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we have some projects that are in some of our cities that are continuing on and using this framework. And, you know, with the scenarios, for example, really interested in seeing those get used by the cities that we're creating them. The people that participated include city officials, but not exclusively. They often include NGOs and community leaders and so forth. And so how much the city actually takes those up and then begins implementing some of the strategies is a really important question. And I think individual cities, and with some of the projects that new projects that we've started, will be looking to see how well that's happening. But it would be great to have a you know, a wholesale evaluation of effectiveness in 5 years' time or so. Yeah, I agree.
I see Nikki has a question.
Hello everybody.
Hello,
Hi from Melbourne. It's quite late in the night here, but I
yes.
really enjoyed a lot the webinar. I have a question that is a little bit linked to what Thomas asked. Would it be possible, even in a newsletter or in some way, that you share, Nancy, with us some of the good practices from your experience with UREx, so we can actually strategize or turn these good practices into strategies for our different NBS networks, so as to be already very proactive on, like, can we replicate some of your good practices in order to strengthen our networks and in return strengthen and foster NATURA? Because we are different networks, and we all, of course, is a strength of the network, but it would be really nice if you can share whatever you can share of good practice from UREx. So that's it, and thank you for a very good webinar.
Thank you, Nikki. I think, thank you for staying up for this. I really appreciate that. But I think that's exactly what we want to do with NATURA. And it's best practices in what, I suppose, is one thing to think about. So we could form a thematic working group on developing best practices and where do they apply and where do they not apply for some aspect of what we're doing. We do have a couple of things that are probably we can make available, or potentially in the newsletter we can have a rotating best practices box or something like that. We have produced a guide to developing scenarios, and we're working on a guide for how to use the outputs from the scenarios and the kinds of data products that we have been trying to develop. And those include, you know, many many non-traditional products, because really we found that our practitioners were really clamoring to have visualizations for some of these future scenarios, and not so much the data, but things that you could really identify with by, you know, and so the renderings, for example, are really helpful. So we will have those available, and we will put, I think we'll think about a way, those kinds of things from all the networks into the newsletter. And I think we should be thinking, when we have our all hands meeting, about how we might form some thematic working groups that would take on these challenges of looking across the different networks.
Thank you. I'm taking the opportunity to also put one more thing, because you said about the educational activities of UREx, and we have been doing the same with. Oh, Daniela, just a second, sit low. As you see, I have another participant with me. You said about the educational activities, and also like even good practices or reflections of the timing or how they connect with the content produced from the network. That can be also very useful, because it is very common to do webinars or MOOC programs, or even a tailored education for executives and for practitioners. But again, how you set it up, some more insider's knowledge, that would be super useful. And I really like the idea, of course, of thematic working groups. So sorry, thank you.
No, that's great, thank you. I think that in terms of the education program, there is going to be a pretty big synthesis next year that we're working with an independent evaluation group, an educational evaluation group, and they're going to do a pretty big synthesis of the entire findings that they have over the 5 years, 6 years of the project. So I think we're going to try to synthesize that and put that out there, because there are a number of things that I think we've learned from this and that I want to carry forward in developing new strategies for graduate training for the Anthropocene, where, you know, the sort of focus on, you know, disciplinary training and training people for academia only just has got to go. So I think we're learning a lot from our network for that.
Okay, so now we're 2 minutes past our agenda. Thanks, Nancy, and thanks, Jill, for presenting your network today. And thanks, everyone, for joining us today. We'll have our next webinar on May 12th. We'll have Christopher Raymond presenting the Envision and the Viva Plan projects. And then we'll have Bonnie Killer presenting the Beyond the Academy and the Natural Capital Network. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the day, or good night.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Jill.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to end the meeting for all.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jan.
Okay.
You're